All right.
This is a good Delaware River largemouth right here.
There you go. All right.
You want to get him for me?
Yeah, I'll get him.
Oh, he just slightly hooked.
Come here, come here, come here. Oh, look at, oh, look at that one.
Oh, that's
Hey.
nice.
I'm Bob Murray, Pete Gluszak, Delaware Valley Outdoors. Summertime Delaware River fishing. You got to check this one out. Hey, stay tuned. It's going to be a good one.
Delaware Valley Outdoors, your best source for fishing information on TV, radio, and the internet.
All right, come on, bring that boy in.
Yeah, baby.
Oh, all right. Little spinner bug does it again. Hey, I'm Bob Murray. Pete Gluszak, nice to have you on the show. We're out on Delaware River. Thanks for inviting us out here to show us how to catch some fish in the summertime.
It's always a pleasure to fish the Delaware River when I get a chance.
And again, like you said, the tide is the key here, and we're just working the tide.
Tide's starting to fall. It's getting to 2 hours from outgoing tide. We're starting to get some bites.
All right.
It's going to get better.
That's what I like to see. All righty. You know, Pete, you know, it's visible structure. A lot of guys obviously can find that. They can fish it. You know, what you get the pilings and the stuff that comes out of the water. But here we're fishing pretty much a flat bank. What's the story with this?
Well, what this is you know, and this can be the magic on these kind of river systems, is when you can find something that the guys are going to overlook. And you know what we have here is we have underwater current breaks. We have some old pilings and some old pieces down there of industry that have been left behind, and the tide through the years has washed away all the surface cover, and you don't see any evidence of anything on the bank. But underwater, there's still some really rigid current breaks, some really good hard stuff down there. And it's, you know, as you can see, this bank is kind of just a plain nothing bank. But you know, but under the water we have magic, and that when you have something like that, when you have a nothing bank and you have something that's unusual, boy, it's a magnet. You know, it's going to draw fish all throughout the length of this bank to hold on this, especially on the outgoing tide.
Yeah, because there's really nothing for them to hang on to up on the bank.
Absolutely. Key to find a place like this is, again, low tide. Anytime you fish in tidal water situations, I do a lot of idling at low tide, and it helps me see current breaks, because this is the only way you're going to find this place, like something like this, is you're going to see the eddies rolling up at low tide. And then once you see those eddies boiling up, then you get your sonar on top of it, and you kind of get a look at what's down there. But finding a place like this can, you know, just be an absolute fish magnet. When you have places like we see up here a little shallower, we see that there's, you know, a little piece of wood up there, and you know, that's easy to find, and you can certainly see why a fish would hold to that. But I just had a fish blast me right there. See the boil?
I can see it.
See if he gets it. Come on, come on.
He did. Oh, what did I say? I could get him. Yeah, he absolutely tore you up.
He just come up and just breathed on it and just left our big rolling boil up there. Oh, I caught it. I hung on it that time. Go ahead, you throw in there. One of the things that I like to key on, and it kind of will separate some of the fishermen, is when I'm fishing structure like this, is I don't like to just throw it out there and crank it in. You know, you got to impact the cover, number one. Right. You know, you got to get those deflection strikes. You know that. Right. People who've been fishing for a long time know that that's how you get a lot of your bigger fish a lot of time, is catching those deflection strikes. That's hitting the cover. But you hit the cover, you allow that bait to flutter down, and then you start cranking it again, and bam, there comes the strike. By altering your retrieve a lot of times, you're going to catch a lot of fish that a lot of people are going to miss, and you're going to get those fish that are maybe inactive to go ahead and boom, trigger that strike.
That's right, because when you're pulling something over it and then the fish is on the other side of the structure and all of a sudden this thing flutters down,
boom,
he's
there
just
he is.
Coming right out. So it's important to really hit, you know, everybody's afraid I might lose my spinnerbait or I might lose, If you're afraid to do that, you're not going to catch the big ones.
That's right. You know, you got to risk some of those baits. You got to throw into the meat of the cover, and you got to, you know, just say, hey, look, I'm going to lose some lures, but I'm also going to catch a lot more fish.
You're right. All right, let's get that other one, the boiled up one.
Yeah, exactly. There he is. Had to go to the worm to get him. Come on.
There you go.
Ultra shallow Delaware River fish.
You got a little nick on him.
Yeah.
Now, Pete, just give it a quick. We had a bite on spinnerbait, and then you said, you know, let me go into a little finesse thing. Why'd you switch to that?
I switched to the finesse because the conditions kind of dictated it. I'm going to go ahead and let this guy go. We're getting really sunny conditions, although we do have a little bit of a breeze. These are more like what I call pristine type of conditions, and the more power baits, the spinner baits and the cranks just are not putting them in the boat. We've got real high pressure, very few clouds. We do have a little wind cover, which is good, but just been unsuccessful with the crankbait and spinnerbait. So my next step is to just kind of downsize. You know, go to a finesse bait, 8-pound test, a worm, and that put a fish in the boat. Wasn't a giant, but let me tell you, the fish on this river, big fish, will eat this little bait. So, you know, that worked once here. And the tide's getting lower and lower.
So it's getting into actually a better range.
Exactly. So I expect we'll be able to maybe catch a few more doing this as we get lower. You can see there's pieces over there. Make sure you can cover that stuff pretty good.
All right. Oh, get over there!
Keep them up now. Nice fish.
Come here. Oh, yeah, lost my boat.
All right.
No, come here.
I'm gonna throw right back out there, see if he's got a brother.
You gotta see that we were doing this, and Pete says, Bob, make sure you work that other piece of structure. And I did, because we went right back over it. But again, it was one of those things where I said, because you're lifting and you're bumping stuff.
Right.
And that's it, the whole thing. And I said, wait a minute. And that's when he hit. So
there he goes.
another one. That's right, we'll take him.
We'll take him.
Another sack of that, and we'd be real happy. Pete, this year on the tour, you still got a couple events coming up, am I right?
Oh, absolutely. Got the whole summer season coming up. Just kind of got kicked off. We have basically a spring season, which is the Bassmaster Tour events. And now we're starting the Bassmaster Opens and the Ever Starts. And, you know, the beautiful thing about that is we get to fish for smallmouth all summer long. And, I hate that, you know.
Yeah.
But we fished Lake Erie 3 times this year, and I'll fish the Hudson River, I'll fish Lake Champlain, and you know, there's a few others thrown in the mix, but I'll pretty much stay busy through October this year.
And it's the Northeast you'll basically be in, really.
Yeah, it's pretty much the northern divisions. You know, so they're all, you know, basically the northeastern part of the country. I guess I did go to Minnesota and fish the Mississippi River a couple weeks ago, and that was it's the northern. That's about the furthest west I'll be all summer long.
And you know, they always talk about how glamorous it is on the tour, Pete, and you know that it is not. It's hard work. It's 14-hour days. It's rugged conditions. Just a quick thing, you were on Erie, 8-10-foot waves and all that. Yeah.
Monster waves.
Yeah, and you got to fight all that, but also you have your sponsors and stuff that you know you have to work for too. That's the other part of your job, right?
Well, I wouldn't be able to do my job without my sponsors, and I'm fortunate. I run the Ranger NASCAR boat, and I have an Evinrude outboard, and Garmin Electronics, and Quoro rods, and I'm well sponsored in a lot of these areas that really helps me compete. And I wouldn't be able to do it without my sponsors' help. But the way that our sport is going to is we're starting to see a lot of what we call non-endemic sponsors come on board. Places, things such as Land O'Lakes, Sidco. Just to name a few, Timex was with us for a while, and I'm really optimistic. Of course, being from the Philadelphia area, you know, I'd love to be running the Tasty Cake boat, you know, or possibly the Wawa boat, you know. And I really want to see our sport's growing, and it's getting bigger. We're on ESPN, and it's really becoming a kind of a mainstream sport, and we're growing every year. So I'm expecting to see more and more sponsors like that come on board, and I really am optimistic that I can represent one of our Philadelphia area companies on a nationwide basis and do a fine job with it, because we do get so much exposure. You know, we don't get quite as much as the NASCAR guys do, but we're gaining on them. You know, every year that goes by, it's growing, and it's a great time to be a professional fisherman right now.
That's it, and it's a job, but it's a fun job, but you still got to have those people working for you to get the sponsors in there. So, yeah, I'd like to see it. I would like to see a nice tasty cake boat out there. Or
wouldn't it be nice handing crimpets out to the kids? And well, I could do that.
Oh, well.
Of course, I might have to add a notch to my belt and then maybe rebuy my clothes. I'm not sure, but I'd really enjoy having that, something like that for a sponsor. I think it would be a lot of fun.
I think that's what we're going to work on. Philadelphia sponsorship.
There you go. There you go. Well, this is like a classic tributary for the Delaware. We've got a massive 7-foot tide swing here, and what we're having is this real strong west wind that is really blowing a lot of silt and off-colored water onto the grass beds that usually can be very effective this time of year. And by fishing some of the mouths of these tributaries, what's happening is you're going to have a clear water, and you can actually see the mud lines generated out there from the clear water coming out of the creeks. On the falling tide. And I'm trying to get in here and just trying to basically fish around some clear water in a lot of current, because it's summertime. You want to be around as much current as possible. So clear water, current, and hopefully we'll find some fish up here. But this is an excellent place to be looking for them. When you're fishing an area and the wind is blown and muddied up your area pretty good, the mouths of these creeks on the outgoing tide can be excellent places to find some clearer water.
Yeah, because the fish are being actually sucked out of the creek, and the fish are just waiting for it to ambush them out of these pads and stuff.
Absolutely. Terrific ambush point. Currents, the water level's dropping. There's less and less places for the bait to be, so they're being pulled out. And the bass are just out here trying to capitalize on that.
What makes one creek or whatever better than the other?
Well, for the Delaware, there's a couple key factors you got to take into account, and again, it goes to that tidal swing. We got 7 feet of swing, so one good factor that's going to make a good creek is it's got to have a lot of current breaks. You got to have eddies. When you have that kind of flow ripping in and ripping out, a largemouth is somewhat of an explosive feeder, meaning it sits a lot of its time sedimentary and then it explodes. It doesn't swim in current nonstop like a lot of the other fish species do. So that being said, it's current breaks are key. You got to have a lot of trees. Like you can see some of the trees in the water here. You can see the lily pads that are out breaking the current. That's one absolutely critical factor for a Delaware River tributary. Is it's got to have a lot of current breaks.
And you can see even like the wood that's coming out. That is a current break under the water there.
The little bittiest thing is going to hold a fish on this river. You're exactly right. There's little subtle trees sticking out. You might not think it's anything, but if it's just enough that the fish can sit next to it and rest and not have to fight that current all the time, is going to be enough to hold a fish here. The other thing is depth is critical. Because with 7 feet of water change, some of these little creeks they only hold water at high tide, higher tides. At the low tides, they're bone dry.
Right.
And I like to choose creeks that are going to have water at low tide, so the fish aren't going to have to just get washed out into the main river, anytime there's a tide change. So, these are some things that I look for. Current breaks certainly being key, and time of year. You're not going to be fishing up in these creeks with a lot of current in them in the springtime. I mean, the eggs will get washed away. There's going to be no spawning activity taking place. So it's more of a summer and a fall place. In the wintertime, again, creeks are no good. Too much current. The water temperature is plummeting. Those fish are going to be looking to get out of the current into the harbors or the areas that have very, very low flow.
Right. Yeah.
So,
And this time of the year, it's pretty good weather we've had, you know, but we got that wind blowing and making this, and we've had thunderstorms, which also dirty up the water. So
well, yeah, and we're suffering with dirty water today. We've got a heavy west wind. It's muddying everything up. So we've come into this creek looking for clearer water, looking for a place that's a little bit more stable, and we may be able to generate some bites out of. So yeah, there's a lot of different reasons to go into these creeks on the Delaware River.
just make sure you time it right so you can get out of them, though.
That's critical. That's one thing, and that, you know, that's a great point you make. Is on the Delaware, how about it? The mouths of all of our creeks, even the big ones, have these massive sandbars out on them. So you really have to know how to run them. You have to look at these bodies of water at low tide. That's one thing I do on all my fishing, is I try to assess areas on the low tide. I can see all the cover. I can see which way the current breaks are. I can see how I got to get my boat in and out. One of the keys here, and this is a real challenge at the higher tides, but as the tide falls, you're able to get your baits slipping up under there. And that's absolutely critical, because these fish are positioned and the current breaks all over these pilings that are way underneath this dock here. So if you're casting up to the edge of it, you're going to catch non-aggressive fish or hardly any at all. In order to really be effective, you got to get your baits way up under there and reel them back into the face.
Fish every angle, because there's a lot more under there than what you can see right now.
Absolutely, absolutely. There's rocks under there, there's grass under there, there's current and eddy breaks everywhere underneath this, in addition to the shade that the dock offers. So
And we're on that shady side.
it's an ideal situation. This is exactly how you want to fish it.
And because the current, the tide's coming out with us here, so we're bringing our baits down along the tide.
Down along with the current.
Yeah.
To the novice angler, practice, 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 practice. It's not as easy as it looks to whip a bait caster up under there.
No.
And
we're also dealing with the wind too.
we got wind, we've got big current, but you really, in order to get the bites, you really need to get your baits way on up underneath there.
Now, Pete, we're throwing a spinner bait right now, you and I. Well, you could also pick, I know you will, pick this apart with a jig or a tube or something like that, right?
Absolutely. And I'm coming in here power fishing with a spinner bait and a crankbait I was throwing a little bit earlier. And you know, I'm going to switch over to probably a finesse type worm, which seems to be very, very effective on this river. Just a little 4 or 5 inch worm. But yeah, that's the 1-2 punch you use out here that I like to use on the river. You know, is if I can get them on the cranks and the spinner baits, I will. But when it comes times to get close to the cover, boy, it's really tough to beat those little 4 or 5 inch finesse worms. You know.
Yeah, you're throwing something, a small bait, but yet it's very, very effective.
It is, and I think it really has a lot to do with the forage that the fish feed on this river. They spend a lot of time feeding on eels, small crawfish. This river just seems to be inundated with the smaller size baits, and that's why I theorize that you can be so effective with those little, 4 and 5 inch worms, whereas a jig sometimes is just too big, bulky, and powerful of a bait to generate strikes out here.
Well, Pete, we're here at the tackle box section, and we have a basic selection of lures that basically are in anybody's tackle box, but it's how you use them and the conditions and where we were using them. I think that's important. Okay, first bait we were using today was a crankbait. Tell us a little bit about this bait here.
Well, that's a Bagley's crankbait. It's a big build, wide wobbling crankbait, and it's an excellent crankbait for fishing around cover and for fishing around current. The wide wobble allows you to get through a lot of the debris that we were fishing, like wood, pilings, pipes, metal. The wide wobble kicks the hooks away from the cover and allows you to get those baits through that cover, which is going to trigger your strikes. So, in any time, and we had higher tide this morning too. That's why I have it. This bait runs about 10 feet deep. So I'm going to use a little bit deeper running crankbait at a higher tide, and then I'm going to go to the shallower lips at the lower tide. So the Bagley's is an excellent tool for for fishing tidal water. It's one of my go-to baits for sure.
And color?
Color, I use chartreuse and black. It's hard to go wrong with chartreuse. It's more visible in variable light and watercolor conditions. It's one of the things that I consistently use on tidal river situations. I'll use a chartreuse and a black, or I'll use a white with a black back. More of a natural presentation when it's calmer out and the water's really, really clear.
Okay, can't go wrong with a spinnerbait, right? But let's talk about this spinnerbait here.
Well, this is an old spinnerbait. It's actually a hydro lure, which is something that's I don't even think it's manufactured anymore. But there's a lot of spinnerbaits out on the market like it, and it's a great representation of a white perch, which the river is just covered up with them. And we actually caught one there towards the end of the day. It's got a lot of silver in it. It's white, and it's got red where the gills go, where the gills are typically seen. And red's a great trigger color for fish, because when they see that red, man, they think that fish is injured, and it's an easy meal. And it's a double willow leaf. It's got a lot of silver in it. You can see the silver blades, silver in the skirt. When we got bright skies and clear water, that's given us a lot of flash. It resembles that white perch, and we were very effective at catching a few fish on the spinnerbait today.
Yeah. And the other thing is, always add that trailer hook.
Well, people ask me, do I use a trailer hook? And I always use a trailer hook. Now, I rarely use a trailer like a soft plastic trailer. I don't hardly ever use one of those. I don't really feel like it helps me catch additional fish, but the trailer hook, guaranteed. Every time I'm using a buzz bait or I'm using a spinnerbait, got to have the trailer hook.
Okay. Now the conditions changed a little bit, and we caught some fish on the crankbait, on the spinnerbait, and then we had to go to a little finesse worm, right? Tell us a little bit about this one.
Well, this is a little finesse worm. It's really my go-to bait, and I have one. In every tournament I fish, I'm going to have a finesse worm tied on the deck of my boat, because I think it's an absolute critical way to catch that fifth fish, to catch a limited fish when you really need to. And what we were doing was we were power fishing, we were cranking, and we were spinnerbaiting. And when the conditions got a little bit tricky, and we couldn't catch any more fish, and I downsized, and I started using the little finesse bait, and we were able to catch a few more fish off the same cover after we were done working them over with the other baits. Now, this rig is an excellent rig, and it's got a, I'm going to take it from your hand there, it's got a slider head, and you can see it's got the weight is attached to the hook. And I simply rig it weedless, and I use that around weeds, wood, and it comes through without hanging up. But this little rig is a dynamite fish catching tool. It's what I call my go-to bait when I really, really need to catch a fish. If I was on a desert island and I was allowed to have one tool to feed me and my family, it would be this bait right here.
Okay, and this bait, you're throwing this on a spinning rod?
Yeah, exactly. It's a light, it's an 1/8 ounce. So I'm using 8-pound test, sometimes 10. I'm using a spinning rod, about 6.5 to 7 foot, medium heavy action Quaro rod. And that's the best way that I found. The deeper the water, the longer the rod, because you need that long rod to pick up all that line.
Yeah. And here's the last lure that you kind of really like on the river because of the grass situation. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, this is a rattle trap. And a rattle trap is just an outstanding fish catching machine anytime you're around grass. Now, we weren't effective with it today because we didn't catch any fish out of the grass today. We caught all our fish around wood and metal. But if we were, when the fish are relating really strong to the grass, it's tough to beat that rattle trap. And it's simply a bait that you want to actually get into the vegetation. So a lot of people will make the mistake of trying to avoid the clumps of grass, but you don't. You want to hit it with this bait. You want to get those hooks wrapped up in it, and you want to snatch that rod and make that brrr sound as that bait's ripping out of the grass. It'll get you that trigger strike every time, reaction strike. On the Delaware River, I'll use a chrome and a blueback, and then I'll use the chartreuse colors, and you can see this has a nice chartreuse belly on it, so it's a really highly visible bait.
Just one thing that you mentioned before about ripping it out. Talk a little bit about the rod combination you use for this, because it's a little different, because you're really stiffening up the rod, right?
Right. Well, you want to be able to, you want to have a rod that's going to be very effective at getting it out of the grass. And if your rod is too soft, what's going to happen is your rod's going to load up, and you're not going to be able to get that out of there. So sometimes, I go to a medium or medium heavy action rod when I'm trying to get that bait out of the grass. But here's the little trick that I use. I use super lines when, with the braided lines. When I'm dealing with grass, and that allows me to use a softer, limber rod, which is going to help me catch fish on the
right.
crankbait, land them. But the line that has zero stretch, that super line, it'll pull those baits, it'll rip them right out of the grass with very little effort. So that's a little trick I use when it really counts.
Okay, and you have one other neat little product here that we want to talk about, because I think it makes sense to do it. Talk a little bit about this.
Well, this is Rod Shield, and it's made by Hot Rod's boat wax company, and they build all kinds of waxes and cleaners, and this is a cleaner for your rod. And what you simply do is you spray it on your rod, and I use a rag, and what I'll do is I'll spray it on the rag and the rod, and I'll clean off all my eyes of my rods. What it does is it actually waxes the eyes of your rod, and it reduces the friction. You'll find you can cast 10, 20, 30 feet further by using this product on a regular basis. When I'm using 8-pound tests, when I'm trying to skip things under docks, spinning rods, it's unbelievable how much further you can make your bait go by using a product like this.
There you go. Little tip, 5, 10 feet more, catch another fish. Hey, that's the tackle box.
Well, this is another classic example of some isolated wood out on the river, creating some current breaks. And as we get closer to low tide, there's less and less places for fish to be, so they're going to come right out here on the current breaks on the wood that's out here in the river.
And I'm still throwing a worm, but you said you're going to throw that spinnerbait and keep it moving, and let's see what happens.
Yeah, that was it's a 1-2 punch here. It's you got to go for the reaction strike, and that's what the spinnerbait's going to do. And then, when you want to get a little bit more pinpoint, and they're not really, they won't cooperate with the reaction strike. That's when I go to the more finesse baits and the worms, and we've been effective on this particular piece cover on both techniques, and that's usually the way it is. You usually pluck a couple real quick and easy on a spinnerbait or a crankbait, and then slow down and work it over thoroughly with some plastics, and you can catch a few more. Go! He come off that piece of wood. Oh, that's a nice one. Oh, it looks like I got him on the trailer hook too.
Oh, there you go. All right.
Right on the trailer hook. Look at that.
Look at that. See that? Important to get a trailer hook. Am I right, friend?
No doubt about it.
That saved you. Hey, Pete Gluszak, I want to thank you for coming on the show today. Delaware Valley Outdoors. I'm Bob Murray. Summertime fishing, Delaware River.
Nice.
I'll see you on the water. Good going, buddy.